There was elation when RCB won IPL after 18 years of its existence, quickly followed by shame. Bengaluru, its people, the organizers, administrators, and politicians collectively completely shamed ourselves by creating a stampede and killing 11 people in celebrating this victory. If you thought there was one person to blame and a simple solution one of them could have implemented, you are mistaken. In true Uru Labs fashion, I am going to give you some theory before I get around to telling what could have been done. We are back with another episode of the Uru Labs podcast, and I am your host, Satya Sankaran. Let's begin by asking the question, what is the value of a life? This is a popular question asked in Ethics of Public Policy via the famous trolley problem. The trolley problem is a thought experiment in ethics that presents a scenario where a runaway trolley is about to kill five people, and a decision maker, usually you, can divert it to a track where it will kill only one person. The dilemma that it explores is the moral choices we make. Normally, you would think it's better for one person to die instead of five. But what if that one person was your close relative? Would the five then be less valuable than the one? Why is this important? Why are we talking about it now? Because as a society, our reactions to human life is so subjective. 300 people in an airplane is so much more news than the 500 who die on our roads every day due to traffic accidents. Or wait for this, 16,000 people die every day of non communicable diseases in India, like heart attack, diabetes, etc., because of our lifestyle. We will still build the city for motor vehicles. We still don't believe we need physical activity and sit in cars eating junk. Now, back to the stampede. Most of us have moved on, busy with other activities. As of this recording, the Commissioner of Police of Bengaluru has been removed from his position, along with a few other officers. Few people from RCB management are in jail. But what do we value? Do we value life even more after the event? Do we behave differently in crowds after the event? Did the systems and methodology change in how we manage crowds after the event? A big no on all counts. What can we practically change for such scenarios in the future? I spoke to Professor Ashish Verma of the Indian Institute of Science Sustainable Transportation Lab, and here is what he had to say.
Thanks for having me, Satya. There are two aspects of crowd management: the pre-planning and the real time. Okay. It certainly doesn't have to be this ad hoc, the way it is being done and often, looked at. It's actually, crowd is actually is a complex science. Yeah. And one has to take it as a complex science and deal with it accordingly. It cannot be a simple use of kinetic force that we rely on, which often actually results in it often results in counterproductive outcomes, and it cannot be random and just an afterthought. Now, on the pre-planning aspect, there's a lot can be done. When you have an event, you have certain idea of that event, where it is going to happen and how it is going to happen. There are certain fundamental aspects of crowd management guidelines can be used to essentially see that there is a pre-planning in place with respect to how crowd would be maneuvered, how they'll be channelized, and how this will ensure a least of possibilities of any crowd risk situation. Okay, and crowd risk situations happen both because of physical forces and psychological forces. While physical forces do play a role, the trigger most of the time in many of these crowd disasters have been a psychological trigger, okay, which we fail to understand. We have deeply, looked at all kinds of disasters, crowd disasters that have happened in past in India as well as elsewhere in other parts of the world. And psychological forces play an important role in actually acting as a trigger. Anyway, so the point is that pre-planning, there are crowd management guidelines that can be taken care, as well as there are tools. For example, a simulation framework which can be used. We have, for example, developed some crowd risk severity prediction models. Okay, so if you incorporate these crowd risk severity models into a simulation framework, you can actually test out your pre-planning, your plans, your crowd management plans, what kind of, barricading you're doing, what kind of arrangement of movement that you're expecting. Second is real time. Okay, real time also you can do monitoring. Okay, nowadays all crowd events are big data events. We don't realize it for the simple reason that most of the people are carrying cell phones or mobile phones, and so you have that data at your hand. Secondly, you have a good presence of CCTV cameras, surveillance cameras, and in the crowd event area also, if you deploy them properly, to monitor important locations, that also becomes a good source of data. Third is there are a lot of cheap and easily available wearable devices that can also be used. For example, at least some people in the crowd who could be part of the organizing team, etc., also wearing it, which can also beam some data. Okay, so all these data sources can also help in some way assessing the crowd formation and crowd buildup and forecasting its maneuvering, say for next 10 minutes, next 20 minutes, next half an hour, and so on, which can also give us some leeway, in terms of the small prediction ability to then quickly see what can be done to prevent a situation of crowd disaster. Now, with respect to RCB, we know that the crowd buildup started with misinformation. Okay, there were a lot of misinformation or information that was passed on, which was retrieved, which was again put, etc. Yeah, and that had a build up on the psychology of people. These were all fans of a particular cricket team, and there was a motivation with which they were all, thrilled and wanted to move towards that area where this whole event will happen. But because of misinformation and lack of clarity, that build-up kept happening and led to a situation where what we saw. Okay, and yes, the shortage of time to do any pre-planning added up to that confusion and chaos and the severity of the crowd disaster that happened. So, if, for example, you could map the density of mobile phones and the movement of the mobile phones, you could have easily anticipated how many people, how can authorities say that we didn't anticipate that so many people will turn up? Come on. You can track these mobiles, you can track the density of the mobiles, and you'll understand that this is building up.
Pre planning is completely absent in India, and even if it is done, it's ad hoc and gut feel based. Infrastructure is not modeled scientifically. Many governments across the world, especially in Europe and the US, mandate that events that attract large crowds, like sporting events, have to provide simulation models of crowd management and emergency and evacuation plans as well. Tools like PTI Viswalk and In Control Simulator have the ability to model these things. Maybe an active mobility center of excellence that Professor Verma is looking to set up can make available the modeling services for a fee to help large event organizers and the administrators as well. It's one thing to pre plan, but totally another to know what to do when the shit hits the fan.
It's a bunch of things. It's a bunch of things. Now, for example, from our Kumbh experiment project, which we did in Ujjain Kumbh Mela, we eventually, after a lot of empirical research from the data that we collected, we have also created some set of general ground management guidelines. They're there in our report and can be downloaded from our IST Lab website also, those crowd management guidelines. So those are like some thumb rules and certain, a certain way of putting the or channelizing the crowds that would ensure that possibility of conflict situations and possibility of these physical and psychological forces gets minimized. Okay, these are all doable, and this could be part of thumb rules. Now, what we are really missing in the country is certain sets of do's and don'ts and protocols whenever there is a crowd management, this whenever there is a crowd event, those should be invoked, and the authorities should prepare accordingly. Okay, this is both for pre-planning preparedness during the event when the crowd is there, and also to ensure in case of any still in case of any unfortunate event, what kind of protocols are in place for post disaster response and recovery. Okay, in RCB stampede case, we also saw that the whole post disaster recovery and response was completely missing. I think they just did not prepare anything. They did not had any provision of ambulances on standby. They did not had any standby doctors. They did not had any medical kits available. It was complete lack, absence. And this only happens when there is an absence of such protocols and guidelines. The country badly needs, and in this year itself, we have seen 5 to 6 major stampedes already in the country, from Kumbh to Goa, yeah, to RCB, and some more. And it keeps us, emphasizes this point that first, the authorities really need to, government really need to understand that it's a complex science, and you need to bring crowd experts, who understand crowd science, and build these kind of guidelines and protocols for every crowd event in the country. Based on the nature of crowd events, certain things can differ, but you can certainly come up with this. So this would help prepare for the crowd events better.
Let's talk about the crowd. Mob or herd mentality is a psychological phenomenon that refers to the tendency of individuals to conform to the behaviors and belief of a crowd around them, often at the expense of their own judgment or individuality. So, even if you're a rational, calm person alone, you may mimic some of the rowdiness in a gang of your friends, if that's the company you keep. In the end, how can you contain the irrational behavior of some individuals from affecting the others in the crowd? How does one manage crowds?
These are big data events. You should leverage on all those technologies, but not in an ad hoc way. Just by putting cameras, this and that, it's not going to work unless you really know how to use that data for certain prediction ability. And then using same scientific tools to see what is that you can do to dissipate this potential situation of crowd risk may arise. Now, again, taking example of RCB's case, the people were at the gates, and I think the gates were suddenly opened. Okay, so when you have a sudden release of force, so it's just exactly like, for example, any kind of pressured cabin or any kind of pressured pipe. If you have a sudden opening anywhere in that, yeah, it will lead to a gush of whatever inside is there, whether it is a liquid or a gas or something, yeah. And that gush can actually, the force of that can actually have a lot of damage. So the crowd actually is the same thing. You have to treat it like some kind of a compressed a liquid, yeah. And if you suddenly open, it's going to suddenly come out, it's going to gush, yeah. And in that process, so you are suddenly releasing that physical and psychological forces that are building on that crowd. Physical in the sense that they are body to body contacts, yeah. So the force from one body to the other body is transferring. Psychological in the sense that they are waiting since morning, yeah, and are impatient now. They can't wait any longer, they are getting crazy and those things. So that's also the buildup of psychological forces. So by opening up the gate, you suddenly try to release that both physical and psychological forces, which then starts creating injury on these individuals, and this is exactly what happens. So you should never allow that sudden opening. You may recall the same thing had happened in Tirupati when people were waiting for at one of the gates. I think it was some special day for the tickets, yeah. and they suddenly opened. So they kept them waiting for quite long, and that resulted in buildup of both psychological and physical forces. And when the gates were opened, it was a sudden release of that force and pressure, which created body harm. It was exactly the same situation in the stampede that happened in the Prayagraj at the Shahi Snan location, where people were standing and sitting for from the night uh, to see a possibility of a early hour darshan. But then people started, after so much of waiting, etc., the psychological force that built up, and when you suddenly release, so there are several examples of such, and we keep doing this mistake. Okay. Second thing is, when you start applying kinetic force, that means lathi charge and those things, that actually always proves to be counterproductive, because this itself will result in stampedes. Likewise, vehicles going through the crowds. Yeah. Cross movement, when you allow opposite streams to rub each other. Yeah. The opposite streams of people, that also creates points of friction. Or you have a continuous barricade, and at some location the barricade has been broken or being opened by somebody, you will start seeing a local area of turbulence. Yeah. So these are all pointers of how you can avoid situations.
While crowd behaviors could be irrational, it is not random. They are predictably irrational. The ability to spot irrationality beforehand and as the events are unfolding and having a line of communication with the crowd could possibly be hugely game changing.
The role of information is huge in it can be, if it is misinformation, it can lead to huge negative impacts and situations of disaster. If it is a proper information and channelized information, it can actually help control the crowd well, anticipate the situation, and reduce chances of any risk appearing. Okay. Again, taking the case of RCP, if this information and misinformation would not have, let's assume that in the morning by mistake you tweeted on that there will be this whole procession, etc., but you realized you took it down. But where was the clarity and information? Where was that consolidated channel through which the information, different people's was randomly putting things on the social media, and just making it difficult and confusing for. Okay. So RCB's stampede case, I think one of the key reasons was this: we don't really pinpoint on these aspects to fix accountability, but they just don't happen randomly or just in a fit of a rage or seconds. It was a whole build up because of this misinformation. It's always the case. There was a stampede in Mumbai, a suburban train station, Elphinstone Road, where over a bridge, and it was raining. Yeah. uh, um, Somebody who was carrying a basket of flour, all these vendors, local vendors, they also carry their flowers in trains, then go and sell them and so on. Somebody was carrying that, and when the density was higher, his basket fell down, so the flowers fell down. So in Hindi he said "Phool gir gaye," and people heard "Phool gir gaya." Pole means the bridge, and that created that psychological trigger and the panic. Otherwise, every day in Elphinstone Road or many other suburban train station is the same density of crowd, but the stampede doesn't happen every day. Yeah. And that day it was cumulative because there was a weather issue. The rain was happening, so people were not dispersing out of the covered, sheltered walkways, towards their exit, and they were kind of, retaining themselves. So it's all, I mean, that's why I keep emphasizing that it's a complex science. If the country doesn't understand that it's a complex science and need to deal it accordingly, and not with this random thought processes and experience and use of kinetic force. I think we are doing great injustice, you know.
So, what happens next? What should the various stakeholders do and change from their end?
So first thing is, you know, whenever such application of a crowd gathering being organized, or when a permission is sought, okay, that stage itself, the authority should ensure that there is certain sets of checklists that is being taken care, that is being told to the organizers that these are the things that you got to do in place, okay, with respect to how they should ensure the basic tenets of the crowd movement, how they should ensure fast recovery and response, and what things should be in standby, okay, what kind of technology or set of technology that they should use in the event area for close and coordinated monitoring and so on. So, with a good research and inputs from crowd scientists, I think government should develop these kind of sets of do's and don'ts, which should be ensured that the organizers adhere to it and follow it before they are given permission to hold a crowd event. And this should be must. Okay, because otherwise we are playing with the lives of thousands of people. So that is in my opinion the most important and essential thing that we should do.
And in my opinion, if you are participating in high crowd events, remember the risks. You're seeing it repeatedly. Scarcity leads to irrationality. In places where the supply of product or services is lesser than the demand for it, it's going to be a fight and you're possibly going to be involved. Especially in immature events and venues where the crowd is being managed poorly, you are at higher risks. Get out of such places quickly. It's not worth it. Set a higher standard of crowd management. Don't be sheep for engagement farming. You deserve respect and you also need to behave responsibly. That's better citizenship. Take care. I'll see you soon with another topic.